Good morning, everyone. We are in Mishnah's Arla, Parak Aleph, Chapter 1, Mishna Gimel, Mishna 3. I'd like to dedicate this morning's learning in memory of my mother, Mrs. Shlamis Rabinowitz, Shlamis Bas Rav Yaakov Eliezer. Okay, Ilan Shenekar Vasela Imai. A tree that was uprooted, let's say by a flood or a storm, actually by a storm. Vahasela Imai, literally translated means and the rock with it. It means the soil rock, which is explained as the clump of earth that hardens around the roots of a tree, remains stuck to the roots when the tree is pulled from the ground. So it's been uprooted by a storm. The soil rock is still with it. Shtafai nar, or a river flooded it, and that's what uprooted it. Vaseli imai. But again, the soil rock is still with it. The question here is this tree already was more than 3 years old? It already passed the stage of Arla. The question is, though, is that now that it's been uprooted and then replanted somewhere else, is that considered like it is a new tree? And would have to start the counting of Arla over again. So the Mishnah says, if it's able to sustain itself, meaning if the soil rock that's still there can sustain it, then it's exempt. Then if the soil rock that's there can still sustain it, then it's as if it was never really uprooted. It's still in its original earth. So it hasn't been, it's not like a new tree. And therefore, in that situation, you're exempt. Now, being able to sustain itself, they bring down here in the notes from the Chazon Ish, that the soil rock does not have to be able to sustain the tree for 3 years, but which is the time period of Arla, but only until the tree is able to strike new roots in its new location. Okay, so it got moved to a new location. It's going to take root in a new place. The question is, could it have survived? Could have been sustained just by the original soil rock? If it could have been, then it's exempt. The imlav, but if it can't, chayiv, then the obligation of Arla is there. Because if it couldn't survive on its own, it's only now going to survive because it's going to put roots in a new piece of land, a new piece of ground. So that's like a tree that grew on its own. And therefore, the Arla count will start again. Next case. Let's say the soil rock was uprooted from its side. So again, let's say a flood came and it tore away the soil rock. So the tree was not uprooted, but it tore away some of the soil rock. And now its roots are exposed. Okay. Or it happened that while you were plowing, because of the plowing, that's what now basically moved off or knocked off some of the soil rock from the tree. Or the person shook it. He shook the dirt, meaning that soil dirt. He shook it, or shook the tree, whatever. He shook the dirt till the dirt became very loose, and now it doesn't sustain the tree like the soil rock would. Okay, so in all these cases, the tree is not uprooted from its place like in the first cases, but the soil rock has been uprooted, at least partially. The roots are exposed, and now the question is, what's happening now? You have to remember this most important part is that after the soil rock gets knocked off, the person now takes new dirt and he repacks it. So now it comes out that again, the roots are surrounded by the new dirt. They get nourished from the new dirt, but it's the new dirt. It's not the old dirt. So if it could sustain itself just based on whatever of the soil rock is left to it, then they're exempt. And now repacking it with new dirt doesn't change its status. It's still in its original. It's considered its original ground. But if not, meaning again, if without this new added dirt would not be able to survive, then chayev, then it's going to be obligated in Arla. So in both the cases, the question is the soil rock still there? Is there still enough soil rock there to be able to say that it can be sustained just with that? And if it could, then it's like it was never uprooted. If it can't, whether the tree was completely uprooted with the soil rock with it, or whether some of the soil rock got removed, now the question is there enough for it to sustain it? If there isn't enough to sustain it, then it's like a tree that grew on its own anew, and you'd have to start the count of Arla over again. So that's the point of the Mishnah is you could have a tree that actually already went through 3 years of Arla, but you have to do it again if halachically we see it as a tree, as a new tree that was growing on its own. We continue in the laws of Rechilas, chapter 1. You're up to Sif Vav, paragraph 6. Even if he sees that without revealing to Reuven what Shimon said about him, this will cause him, by refraining from revealing that, a great loss. He is under the control of others. He works for others. And when they start realizing something happened, and then they pressure him to reveal what that person said about them, and he doesn't want to do that, may suspect him of being together with this person who spoke against them. And they'll fire him because of that. And he'll lose his livelihood to support his family. Nonetheless, it's usher. Like all other prohibitions of the Torah, the person is obligated to give away everything that he has and not to transgress them. Meaning, when it comes to any prohibition, any Torah prohibition, a person has to give up all their money if need be so as not to transgress. So here, speaking Rechilas is a Torah transgression. It's a Torah prohibition. You cannot transgress it just to save your livelihood. Let's say just, even if it means giving up your livelihood. Now, here he adds, unless, if revealing what so-and-so said would actually help somehow to prevent damage, to remove damage, to prevent damage, or to stop or to quiet a quarrel, then it falls under the category of toyelas, of constructive purposes, and it could be permissible. One should not be quick to rely on this license to speak Rechilas, because there are many conditions necessary, as we already mentioned previously when it came to the laws of Lashon Harah, as we will in chapter 9, says the Chavetz Chaim, deal with this at length, and he will. He will deal at length with whether it be Lashon Harah or Rechilas for constructive purposes as to when exactly one can use that license to be able to speak the Rechilas of Lashon Harah and when not. Wishing you a wonderful and beautiful Shabbos, a beautiful Yantif, Chakasha B'Sameach. Everybody stay safe, stay well, and all the best.